Okay. All right, here we are back again. So we're going to begin with our poetic opener, which is, and I would like to introduce you to Sarah Weaver. There she is. Hold on, Sarah. I have to introduce you. So Sarah Weaver is a nature lover, an earth activist, and has written about the environment for many years. She's now branching into poetry and memoir and has been published in both genres in Island Writer. She has been writing since high school when she was literary editor of the school newspaper. We remember those days? That's great. She's a close observer of nature, and in 2002, Sarah's nonfiction guidebook, On the Living Edge, Your Handbook for Waterfront Living, became the flagship product of an award-winning environmental project. Over 5 years, 22,000 copies of the book were sold. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Try your poetry book with 22,000. 22,000 copies of the book were sold, making it a 3-time Canadian bestseller. And here is Sarah Weaver.
Thank you. How's the sound?
Good.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Barbara. And it's great to be here. And hello, everybody on Zoom. I actually see some family names there, so it's great. Got family from Calgary here. So, yeah, I'll read for about 8 minutes. Wanted to thank PEP for inviting me. It's a privilege to be opening for Susan, who I heard at her book launch at the art gallery. So you're in for a treat. First poem is called Near Enderby. Before I moved to Victoria, I lived in the Shuswap for quite a few years, actually. And so this poem was written, inspired by the countryside around Enderby, near Enderby. Late autumn golds bronze the valley, whose soft lines curve around the bend in the road. Clumps of cattails, heads dense with seed, hint of bog in the bottom. Parked near them, ready for another day's work, shining harsh and metallic yellow, an earth mover. It has slashed a road across the valley, cut deep ruts in the wet, muddy earth, reshaped in minutes, eons of molding by wind and rain and snowmelt, leveled dips and contours, straightened the valley's curves. Before I moved to this rural life, I'd never heard of cut and fill. Casual words tossed the same way, I might say, let's go for a drive. Now, when I see that yellow claw and scraping blade, fear lurches and something shrivels, for I know their power. The roads I travel on, my house foundation, what came before? The violet that clings to the ground in April, June's fragile lady slipper, September's goldenrod. A machine treats them all the same, transforms them from life to fill. I want to see if I can tighten this so it doesn't keep collapsing on me. Try that. So the next one is is away from BC and in Saskatchewan. This one is called Grasslands Park, Saskatchewan. Edge of sage and short grass prairie, shimmering spears undulate in endless wind, iridescent flashes of blue grama, waving heads of barley and wheat, needle and thread grass. home of the long-billed curlew, ferruginous hawk, loggerhead shrike, horned lark, and bobolink. The grassland is earth and sun and wind, energy of air in motion. Some call it a thin place where boundaries blur between knowable and unknowable, between time past and present. A sensing floats on the edge of awareness, a veil transparent as thin cloud pushed by the west wind, a memory of bison, antelope, and fox whose bones are scattered among hummocks of prairie grass, of ancestors who walked the plains and left rock rings for teepees and crumbling mud houses. Their spirits are here. The next poem is written back in the Shuswap area, just after a really large salmon run on the Adams River. And since I wrote this, there unfortunately haven't been any runs that compare at all to this particular run. Salmon Run, Adams River. I smell it first, acrid air wafting across the lake from where the river empties into the bay. Then, walking the moist trail through cottonwoods, find discarded in thickets, disintegrating fish, bellies clawed open, scoured by bear. The river is crimson with gleaming bodies which fling themselves upstream, tails thrashing against the force. Its gravels receive their rosy eggs. In death, they will be reborn, their young fed with their bones. Bleached carcasses pile in heaps along the rocky edge, are pushed against log jams by rushing current. Raven, gull, and eagle pick the remains amidst ammonia smell of decay. And still, I see more. Fins slice the water, dance in brilliant sun, a million glittering sails. Among them lies a man, prone, clothed in shining black, still as a corpse in the rippling water, captures images, bears witness. We are thousands, tens of thousands, paying homage. All have journeyed in wheelchairs, strollers, swaggering teens, women in heels, stooped elders limping with canes, tattooed bikers and noisy children, dogs of all breeds and size. Through the scent of frying bannock, past the festival tents with postcards and t-shirts, we are pilgrims in awe, drawn perhaps by spectacle. Or do we come because we know, our bodies know, we are salmon, we are flowing river. Salmon blood is our blood. Sun-whitened skeletons are our bones. We come not because salmon are different, but because we are they. And the last poem is actually coming out in the next edition of Island Writer. It's called If I Forget to Tell You. If I forget to tell you, don't let me leave with casual words the way Mel did, though she planned it well, her niece and doctor and chaplain in the room bearing witness. Don't forget to take out the compost. She left this world with compost on her mind. So don't let me leave talking only of tasks and bins, blue and green. But if I forget to tell you, remind me to talk on my last day of benediction to all I love, to you and to my children, and to the struggling man next door who pushes his wheelchair with sad arms and bumps with difficulty up the curb, a trip to the store, once so easy, now an epic journey. And on my last day, remind me of how my mother smiled at her end, quiet, eyes shining blue, how love begets love. And if I forget to tell you, I want to leave this world the way Kath left, her furry black and white cat, a feline doula astride her lap, her sons on either side, each holding a hand as she cast her last loving energy to them. Yet, perhaps I'll leave without notice, surprised, and there won't be time to say it all, but you will know I wanted to. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful, Sarah.
Yeah.
So happy to have you as part of the tribe. So let's give another hand to Sarah. What a lovely poem to end a reading too. So don't forget to tell everybody. A friend of mine just chose Maid today, so I'm thinking of those kinds of things a lot. Okay, now we are ready for our featured reader. So here is Susan Braley. Yay, Susan. Let me tell you a bit about her. So actually, the first time I met Susan was at a Patrick Lane retreat. And I think she told me that she was just terrified, of course. And she thought that we were all just cool, but we were all terrified too. So Susan lives in Victoria, BC, on the unceded territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. Her first poetry collection, Tilling the Darkness, that you've all bought, I hope, was published by Caitlin Press this year. Her poetry was included in Best Canadian Poetry 2023, which is a really marvelous accomplishment, and appears in literary journals across Canada. In Tilling the Darkness, a young woman in a large family navigates the inequities of gender roles on the farm and in the church. This woman, after leaving the farm, comes to appreciate the complex, bountiful legacy of her early life. Tilling the Darkness explores how we all undertake this tilling ritual in the finite fields of our lives, these powerful poems, as it is often women who, even in the face of injury and erasure, turn dark to light. So, are we excited and ready for this?
Yes.
Here's Susan.
This up just a little bit.
So bad. That work?
This okay? You can all hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. It's wonderful to see you all here today. I want to comment, Sarah, on your lovely reading. Such arresting language. Hint of bog, edge of sage, rock rings, and we are salmon. Beautiful. And thank you, Barbara, for that introduction. I want to thank Russell Books for making room for us here for our poetry, and for the PEP, and to thank the PEP team as well for welcoming me to read here, and also for organizing this extraordinary reading series that we all enjoy each week. I'm also grateful to the League of Canadian Poets for their support. And a huge heartfelt thank you to my generous sponsors tonight, my friends Wendy Donowa, Leah Fowler, Angie Pelorin, and Peter Pinfold. I'm delighted to see you all here this evening, whether you're here in person or whether you're here on Zoom. Welcome. And I'm looking forward to sharing my poems with you from Tilling the Darkness, which was published by Caitlin Press earlier this year. As Barbara has already mentioned in her introduction, this book was inspired in part by my early life in a Catholic family on a farm in Southern Ontario, a past that I shared with 8 siblings, 4 boys and 4 girls. You will meet these people in my book. When I began to write these poems, this rural setting returned to me vividly and really reminded me of the elemental things of which I feel I'm made and that still ring through me, heart and bone. In fact, 3 of the 4 classical elements, earth, fire, and water, run through the collection in a way I didn't recognize at first. The other element is usually air, but I'm going to add stone instead. So you'll notice these elements as I'm reading. I'm going to begin with the poem which features my father tilling with the plow, preparing the earth for a new crop. It's called Only One Round. Only one round. The furrow behind his plow, clean and true, plowshares lifting at the moment fresh till met the headland. My father, our cartographer. His eyes warmed as I climbed up, sat on the red fender wider than the length of my arm. I reached over to grasp the edge of his seat. He didn't need to say, only one round. It was too loud to talk anyhow. The tractor surged, bore down, guttural. Thrum of metal in the soles of my feet. The narrow head of the tractor pressed up the slope like a lead horse, imperious through rubble and muck. I tightened my grip over bumps. Dad didn't reach over to steady me. He sat sideways, calm, eye on the plow. Thin discs slit the ground. Shares carved deep into clay lifted the underside up. The furrow slices gleaming, dark earth pelts. On our return down the slope, the field stretched acres wide on either side, like the open-air theater I'd seen in a book. Black furrows on our left, bleached stubble on our right, like great banners laid down. Gulls swooped, cried out, proprietary. Rogue wind in our faces, clouds mounted high in the sky, gunpowder gray, weighty. He dropped me off, a little smile, then his back. Bank loans, mind likely churning. Calf with pneumonia, bank loans. The tractor roared on. The air so still, close to the ground. Along the furrow, curved mounds laid bare. I searched their seams for glass button, blue bottle, broken plate. I think it's sinking. Let's see if we can get it tight.
I don't know why it's not staying.
Okay,
Okay.
it's sinking a little.
Oh, this bit here
It just mic slides down.
slides down. It must be this bit.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Okay, that's great. So these poems about my rural past are a crucial part of the collection. But I work to try to create a connectedness between the personal and the universal. I was inspired in part by Tony Hoagland, who in his book, The Art of Voice, urges poets to metabolize memory. I spent some time savoring that verb, metabolize. So from a familiar clay loam of the farm to another kind of earth. The next poem came to me when I was visiting the Canadian War Cemetery in Groesbeek, the Netherlands, a few years ago. In April 1946, the remains of over 2,000 Canadian soldiers who had been buried on German battlefields were returned to graves on this Allied soil. So this poem is called Remembering the Fields Where Fathers and Uncles Fought, or Spring Planting. And someone in the audience asked me for page numbers, so this is on page 82. In the fall, when the field is spent, let it fallow. Let the bled earth sleep like a womb after birth, like the sea at its lowest ebb. Let stubble hoard the ground, free of plowshare blade and half-moon hoof. In the spring, let April nurse the ground, soft with rain, then wind from the south. Cast alfalfa seed over the land, let its pea shoots quicken, its heart buds bloom. Let the green green. Just past its youth, strike it down and turn it underneath. Blood of the Lamb. Let the seasons pass, and the field will renew. And now on to a new element. The next poem is called Archive. And I want to mention, in case this word isn't familiar to you, I'll be using the word mow in association with a barn. And it also is very similar to a loft. So the upper level of the barn where straw and hay are kept. This is on page 30. Archived. The barn on its knees, skeletal, one peak still erect, the rest a vast fire pit, lava red field. Men in dark clusters, action figures, watching a giant expire. My brothers work feverish with uncles, cousins, neighbors, heave pigs out of windows, lead the reeling horse down the barn hill, pry the cream separator from the milk house floor, plant it like a flag on the lawn. I race to the stable where my father is freeing the cows, flames crackling in the mow overhead. He urges each cow, a hand on her flank, down the cement aisle to the open gate. His silence calms them. I try to help, beg him to leave. His silence tells me to go. When the fire catches high in the barn, roars like a freak wind through hay piled to the rafters, when the mow glows like a slotted lantern, when spark showers arc toward the house, ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. We are sent to my grandmother's, the little ones and the family papers in our arms. We women, the archive. On our return, cows tethered in the drive shed among the tractors, pigs corralled in the little field, a firefighter, a kind of gladiator, sprays his hose, douses the buildings left standing. The house dark, damp, but itself, I feel something like reverence. The wind has dropped, my mother says. It's safe for you to go to bed. She lights a bit of blessed palm to bring us nearer to God. Your house is on fire, your children shall burn. She has not cried and won't. We don't either. My sister and I lie in bed in our clothes, wonder where the barn cats went. Is that smoke in the hall? My eyes have just closed. Rush of water on the window, like a body flung against glass. Grief trying to arrive. Now this fire has laid waste to the world of this young woman. But there's also a suggestion that perhaps it has laid bare something new in her, a new knowledge. So this next poem, which is called Not a Pretty Stone, it addresses this idea of fire as transformative. On page 90. Not a pretty stone. In Grossmorn Park, I come upon a rock, broken, strange. One side cracked black, mixed with rust red and cream. The other rippled crystal, backlit green, as if shed from a distant planet. Peridotite, Earth's mantle. Mammoth curtain wall between surface and core, that molten heart. Conductor of rising magma and cooling stone, tectonic drag and volcanic flare, forge of common iron and olivine gem. It lines ragged rifts in the deep sea floor until the ocean crust in a wild heave thrusts above the continental plate instead of sliding below. Mantle bursts into air for the first time. Its green glimmers of primal sea for a geological breath, before weather crackles the rock into dull serpentine. I hold the scrap in front of me. Fire, earth, water, jewel, blood blush rising in my hands. I'll now move from the colossal stone of the mantle to decidedly small stones, gravel. In this book, gravel appears several times, and one of the significant messages from this gravel is from my youth. There was a wide gravel path between the house and the barn. And in many ways, this path symbolically represented the two spheres in my farm life, the men in the barn or the fields, and the women in the kitchen or in the garden. And this was a frustrating divide for the sisters in the house, certainly. An unfortunate result, though, of this divide was an uncomfortable distance that developed between brothers and sisters as we grew older. The next poem addresses this divide, but I was surprised to notice after the book was out that the gravel had actually appeared twice in the poem I'm about to read. Poet Stephen Dobbins comments that metaphor has the capacity to breach our linguistic defenses and topple our complacency. And he's right. This is on page 61. It's called Bequest. My oldest brother farmed. He milked cows, worked fields, sired sons, and a daughter. His life was husbandry. He lay dying in hospital in harvest season. His farm passed down to a son. I sat with him, filled with feelings. Love was one, and he the same, I think. The wide gravel yard still lay between us. He pushed his IV between bed and window, watched for his brothers. The guys are coming to get me in the deep dune buggy. A music therapist appeared. He did not look at her when she said his name. She placed an ocean drum in the crook of his elbow, guided his arm along its shallow round. The sound, the sea shushing against stones. It was not a sound either of us had known. But when she played the keyboard, he sat up, hands gripping the drum, tipped the pebbles inside one way, then back to where they began. The room swept clean with waves. He turned to me, gave a slight bow, handed me the drum, sank into the bright white sheets. I tilted the drum, tried to play what he had passed down, a wordless song, a priceless commodity. One more poem about stones. Again, large stones. But the stanzas in this poem are small, one line each, with meaning resonating between them. This was a challenge from Patrick Lane at a retreat. The poem is on page 65. It's inspired by the sculptures and writings of British sculptor Barbara Hepworth. And the poem begins with a headnote from her journals. My left hand, my thinking hand, must be relaxed, sensitive. The rhythms of thought pass through the fingers and grip of this hand into the stone. It is also a listening hand. It listens for flaws in the stones, for the imminence of fractures. And the title of the poem is The Imminence of Fracture. Marble changes color depending on the hands that touch it. White has claimed the back of my husband's head. My father lies in the recliner, lists the names of his children again and again. A man creeps down the highway in the dark, painting the cracked center line. An elephant enslaved for 50 years cries when freed from his shackles. At the edge of the Acropolis, giant toads leap and bark in the cave of Pan. Some shadows are deeper than concavity. Her carvings rise out of the land, spears and hills, spirals and valleys. A woman walks the road, presses the wind, her body wrapped in a shawl. Even granite will wear, no matter how shallow the frost. The last few poems will be about water. The first one is on page 36, and it's called Taking the Waters 1. In a farmhouse down the road, a Mennonite woman unpinned her mesh prayer cap, rested it on plain black shoes. Her black stockings curled under leather tongues, left them behind her on the cellar stairs. She disrobed as far as she could imagine, placed her toes at the edge of the cistern. She let herself fall, or did she spring, into the dark rectangle of rainwater? If only she hadn't run out of medication, my mother said at her funeral. The next water poem is Taking the Waters 2. I sit poolside out of the sun. Under my dress, dark polyester suit with bra shelf. Mira, slight, 15, in her sea green bikini. Her left arm bare, the right in an emerald lycra sleeve. Underneath, old cuts, like minnows clinging when a predator is near. She leaps from the pool's edge, slices the water, glides under like a creature washed clean in the balm of its river. I remember my brothers leaping that hot evening, loose-limbed, naked, into the peat black creek. Non-swimmers imagining their limbs swimming. They whooped, crowed, splashed, white bodies like poltergeists in the dusk. I crouched forbidden in the cornfield and saw their joy, their risk, the dark energy between their legs. Me in the creek once, at a kid's picnic, in the noon glare, in my aunt's maroon one-piece suit, standing in silt water up to my neck to hide the swellings on my chest. I gripped my toes on round stones in the creek bed's ooze, imagined how to lift my body to float. The stone under my left foot reared. I bled. In the pool, Mira surfaces, cropped hair wet, purple water iris blue. She stretches her arms high, her sheathed arm a jeweled banner. She has reimagined shame. She rises gleaming to the deck. Lithe, she walks on tiptoes noiseless. On her thighs, rows of short scars, a faded inventory. The water is clear. I dive in. I have time for one more poem, but before I read it, I would like to say thank you so much for your support of my writing, for being here with me this evening. And I also want to thank you, those of you who are here as poets each week, for your stunning poems. I'm always moved by them. On hearing a poem, Tony Hoagland said, I was already a part of the world, but the unifying, clarifying impact of a poem delivers me to a deeper, more conscious state of being in the world, deeper and better than before, when I was only lost in it. So the last poem is called Cleansed, and one more little farm vocab. I will talk about a hopper, and if a hopper is new to you, it's a wagon in which people put grain kernels after being harvested, and it's often on wheels, so you can move it from field to field, and it's tapered so that you can open the hatch at the bottom and empty the grain out easily. This is on page 22, and it's got a lighter note to it. Cleansed. Airborne, high above the hopper, Dad drops me lightly inside its ripe green walls, sky a hot blue square above. It's easier to sit than stand, the wheat sloping, shifting sand dune, although I don't know the word dune yet. Wheat kernels rounded, each one with a seam down the middle, a tiny eye squeezed shut. A smaller brother and sister land beside me. We pull off our sneakers, blue, red, black. The red horsehead pipe swings over the hopper's lip, a leap in the combine's throat. Stream of wheat pouring down. We lie on our backs, thrust our feet into the thick, cold rain. We don't know the word waterfall. We whoop. Wheat tickles our souls, lights up our legs. We don't know about the washing of feet, the prodigal cleansed, welcomed home. Kernels, split-second stings, sudden weight at our waists. The rain stops. We're half covered, half laughing. We want to go again. Dad looks in, grins. Time to find your shoes, come out. We don't know children could drown in wheat. Only one blue shoe for him to recover on the granary's conveyor belt.